there's so much I want to say about this and that we need to cover about this.
Yeah.
And I just alert people to what I'm going to ask you so they know what we're going to cover.
Yeah.
So the first thing I'm going to cover is and ask you about is if the grandparents aren't there, because this is wonderful if they live nearby and they can visit a lot, or even if they visit several times a year as a fixture and you see them a lot.
And you're expecting it.
So I'm going to ask about grandparents who are not so close by. What do you do about that? But the other thing I'm going to ask about, so people know what to expect on this podcast, is I'm going to ask about it when it's much more complicated and difficult than that. When you, the parent, have had a complex relationship with the grandparent or even a bad relationship with the grandparent, and whether it's possible, for example, to be a really fantastic grandparent but not such a good parent.
Yeah.
And whether you know it's possible that grandparents can bring a great deal to your anxious child, even though you feel they didn't bring a great deal to you when you were growing up, that kind of a thing. So those are the sorts of things I want to ask you about. So shall we start with, you know, the grandparent doesn't live nearby, or the grandparent works full time, or the grandparent, you know, isn't able to just keep visiting and bring this lovely resource of somebody else to worry about you, somebody else to do the colouring with, somebody else to take the burden of anxiety, and even to say to you, listen, I know you think this is anxious making, but it isn't. It's very normal. That's what you were like when you were little. Don't worry about it. But you haven't got access to the grandparent in quite that way. They're not around.
I think we have actually a very lovely community of concerned grandparents that listen to this podcast. Some of whom might live around the corner and some of whom live all the way across the country, even in a different country.
Yeah.
I think you can still make your presence known whether you live there or not. Like lovely things like writing letters or postcards. You might think that wouldn't be enough to give a feeling of care, but it does this thing we call in the biz mind-mindedness, which is this feeling of holding someone else in mind, that somebody remembered you is enough to create a really huge amount of oxytocin. So just because they don't come over every day certainly doesn't mean that they can't feel your love from far away, and also doesn't mean that you can't do things that have this connective force between you. And there's a really lovely book called The Invisible String, which is about being connected to people that you love even though they're not nearby. And we can say to our children, you know, there's an invisible string between you and grandma or grandpa or gaga, goo, whatever we'll call their grandparents.
Yeah.
And just because they don't live nearby doesn't mean that they don't love you and they're not thinking about you. Think of a way that you can keep making contact. Like, for example, every time you see a dog, you send a photo of the dog to your grandchildren.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a big thing. This feeling of connectedness comes from the feeling that the other person, the adult to the child, not the child to the adult thought of the child when they weren't there. And that's true of parents, cousins, brothers, sisters, doesn't matter who. It's this feeling that you care enough about them and think about them enough that even though you're not together, you're still investing in them.
And we have a cousin in our family, I'm not going to say who it is, who has 4 grandchildren far away.
Yeah, in a different country.
5-hour flight away. And she and her husband, who's their grandpa, have made every
I've never known anyone try harder to make it, to be connected even though they're far away. They work incredibly hard at it. They speak to them all the time. They go as much as they possibly can, which for some people might be too difficult to do, but they really, really try. And they also remember things about their grandchildren, buy the right things for the right age, think about the things that they love, save things they found for them in magazines. They couldn't be modelling mind-mindedness better.
And they read books together on FaceTime.
That's what I was going to say. You can have a book club between you and your grandchildren. You can have a playlist that you're all listening to in the car where you think of 5 songs that everyone can listen to on the way to school. It doesn't have to be that you're there in person. You can still get that feeling. But I think the interesting part of this, and it's also, and this came from a particular study, which is a study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, that said that having one person, one adult invest in you is enough to reverse the effects of adverse childhood experiences. And adverse childhood experiences obviously can be things like bullying or finding school very difficult, but it can be really horrible things like abuse or neglect. And having someone, doesn't have to be a family member, invest in you, think about you, put this energy into you and make you feel like you are important, you're the one they see, you're the one that out of all the children they pick you, that's enough of a protective factor to firstly, it does lots of amazing things. One is improve mental health consistently forever. So it doesn't have to be a grandparent. It could be your singing teacher. It could be your football coach. It doesn't have to be a grandparent. The reason they're using grandparents in this particular example is because that's probably the most common relationship people will have. I'm not suggesting that your relationship is common. It's very unique and beautiful, but it's common. Lots of people have grandparents. So that's why they're saying this is an example of this kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be a grandparent. It has to be an invested adult. And the most interesting part is it doesn't just improve mental health. It also improves your possibility of dying young. So you're less likely to die young if you've had someone invest in you. You're less likely to have heart disease. You're less likely to have high blood pressure.
Wow.
You're less likely to have an incredibly, and I think pre-diabetes. And there's a surprisingly large array of things that are decreased from having one person invest in you. And that is absolutely amazing. And there are lots of studies about it, particularly from this perspective of adverse childhood experiences. It doesn't take a lot to reverse these factors. And obviously what they're saying in that particular study is that children who've had very, very bad childhoods can be supported to have better lives. And that is an amazing thing. And I think that this idea about grandparents is a really good way of putting this feeling across, that it doesn't take that much to make someone feel invested in and improve their life. And anyone can do it, whether you're a grandparent or you're a teacher or you're the cheerleading coach. This feeling of investment is the thing that changes people's lives. And if you're lucky enough to have grandparents that live nearby and can come over, go over, come over, invite them over. And obviously, as you said, there will be families where you maybe had adverse childhood experiences at the hands of your own parents. Is it the right time to welcome them back in to be a protective factor? It really depends. It really depends whether it feels safe enough for you. I don't think anyone should engage in relationships that feel unsafe for them. It's going to feel much, much more complicated to bring your children into something that feels dangerous for you, harmful for you, toxic for you. And everyone is human, and they can do all different kinds of things. That we can use the phrase everyone's human in this context to say maybe they didn't mean it, or the opposite. They're humans and they're flawed, and maybe you don't want to bring your children into something so flawed. You know that the relationship will be toxic, dangerous, confusing, would change the way they see very simple relationships between adults and children. It probably isn't the right protective factor grandparent that we're talking about. They're probably not that person. Are there things they could do? Something very separate, something very organized, like they always take them to their piano lesson.
Or they teach them sailing or
something specific. I think you can, as a parent, help organize the relationship they have into a safe box that feels enough safety for you and enough for them. And you can think about, how would I have set this up for myself? I think it's very easy as a parent to fight for your own kids. You know, you might not say to your own parent, when you say that to me, it's hurtful. But you definitely would if someone says something hurtful to your child.
Yes.
So maybe there will be an element of empowerment in the way that you set up the relationship that would mean that it wouldn't be, it would be difficult, but you could in some ways liberate your own inner child who wished they had said those things by saying them about your children. And you can be much more quick to say, no, this doesn't work for us. The way you speak about it isn't right. The way you touch them or talk to them, I don't like that, and we're not going to. And I think it's very easy, much easier to do that for your children than for yourself. So I think there are ways to organize your relationship with this adult. If you think it would be helpful, it's your only opportunity for childcare, there's something that means you really kind of have to do it. I would think about, how would I set it up in a way that limits the spread and scope of this person? So they're not commenting on what the children wear, for example. They're not feeding them food that's different from what you would feed them. You're trying to think, how do I limit this? I've made the dinner. They're only here for an hour, for example. And if that doesn't feel right, I would not do it. I would try and think, is there something else I can do? I don't think you have to invest in a relationship just because, in theory, the studies say something, because they're probably not talking about your grandparent.
Yes, it is true, however, that some grandparents are good grandparents and they weren't good parents.
Absolutely true.
Learned along the way. They don't take it as personally. They're able to sort of be more generous and open-hearted and uncritical.
That's true.
With their grandchildren than they were with their children. But if you're a parent who has been damaged by or broken by or very hurt by your own parents, just be on red alert.
Agreed. And also, you don't have to keep going. You don't have to keep going. It can stop with you, and you can give it a try and work out whether it feels like it's crossed a line. The reason we have anger, sadness, and this feeling of being overwhelmed is so that we know when something's come into our, sort of penetrated our bubble in a way that feels uncomfortable for us. That's the reason we have those feelings. So if you notice them, think, can I redefine this to make it safer again? What would I need to do to make this feel comfortable for me and my children? And if there's no way that I can do it, that's not the grandparent we're talking about.
But on a sort of upbeat note, I would say that for an anxious child and a parent who's anxious about their child's anxiety, a decent, nice, kind, well-meaning, sometimes you're going to make an absolute botch of it because we're all human. You can't necessarily do it all right. You may need a bit of educating yourself as a grandparent, but you can form a really good kind of extra layer, a kind of extra
Agreed.
rung in the ladder to help with the anxiety. Because anxiety, as we've learned in this podcast, as I've learned from you, is all about a deep feeling of being, absolutely at the peak of maybe feeling that you're going to be wiped out by something really terrifying. And if you've got reassuring parents and reassuring grandparents as well, and if the grandparents can play the venerable wisdom sagacity card. Sagacity is just a posh word for wisdom. But I'm sagacious,
like a sage.
As I said to my own grandchild this morning, I said I'm 64 years old, and I have never seen a wolf in England. And I'm an old lady, and I've never seen one. So we do not have to be frightened about that. I've lived here for 64 years, and I have not seen one of those. And that helps to give an extra kind of
an extra layer
feel on it, doesn't it?
It's an extra layer of truth to something that might feel like confusingly unfactual.
Yeah, so you're bringing some history, you're bringing some experience.
Exactly, and you're also bringing, I think one of the other things we haven't said is you're bringing confidence in the parent.
Yes.
What your mum has said is correct. I agree. You can't go to the party and your mum's definitely right. You confirm the feeling that the parent says, and also use your age and wisdom to show that you agree. That holds everything in a firmer position for the child and the parent. So there are loads of things that grandparents can do. If you're lucky enough to have a good one like this one, you're very lucky. And if you're not, you can find what we're really saying is there are lots of great relationships. It doesn't have to be your parent or your partner's parent. It can be anyone who is willing to invest kindly in your child, and you just have to wait till you trust them back to let that be a thing. I think there are lots of ways we can improve our children's lives, and finding safe, wonderful adults to add in is a really good one.
All right, so we're going to take a break now, and when we come back, we're going to answer one of your questions, which you kindly sent to
Help My Child's Anxious pod on Instagram, or helpmychildsanxious@gmail.com.